Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. My name is Irina, and I'm the event planner for the Renman Reactor space. Before we get started, I have a few things to go over. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience as well as our presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat. Please be mindful of your commentary and remain professional and on topic. Useful links will also be shared in the chat. The session is recorded and will be available on demand in 24 to 48 hours on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Which brings us to today's session. The session will run approximately 1 hour with questions throughout. Our speaker today is Sam Wronski, who is a regional cloud advocate. I'll now turn it over to Sam.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Wronski. My job is to help empower all of you to build really cool things with Microsoft technology. And so what we're going to be taking a look at today in the Reactor Code Lab, sort of our experimenting and learning new things stream, is we're going to be taking a look at some of the tools you can use when you're developing on Windows. So I've been doing this for a while, and I wanted to share some of the just really cool things that you can do with the platform. So we're going to be taking a look at Power Toys, the Windows terminal, and some ways you can use code that you might not, or Visual Studio Code that you might not be familiar with, sort of integrating it with your command line. And we'll also hopefully kind of take a look at some of the things you might not know that you can do. Sort of hoping to end this stream by implementing a custom terminal shader so that we can have some graphics going on in our shader that does custom things. If you're curious what that looks like, if you've seen previous streams, I'll just clear this. I have a custom shader in my terminal that is just a flag. This is all just something that you can code and add and customize for your own shader. You can also use ones developed by the community. So if you want to make your terminal appear differently, this is an option. So we're going to kind of show you how to do that at the end of this. So that's sort of where we're going to start. There were some links just shared in the chat that will get you started with what the Windows terminal is and how to install it. And that has all the installation links that you need to get started. You can also install it through Winget. So you can just search for Windows terminal, and it should just show up here. Winget is, I believe, available by default on Windows 11 and above. And what this is a package manager for Windows. This lets you just find and install different things directly onto your system. So in this case, we have the copies of Windows Terminal and the Windows Terminal Preview. You can also see that this is available on the Microsoft Store. So if you want to click your way through, that's an option too. You can just open the Microsoft Store, search for Windows Terminal, and it should be right there. So both of these should be an option for you to just kind of get started with Winget and start working with that. When we talk about the Windows terminal, that is a host for all your different shells, whether that's PowerShell, command prompt, or any of your WSL environments, or anything else. So we're going to be creating our own custom profile in this stream to run the .NET-REPL. If you are not familiar with that, that's a tool that lets you run a REPL for .NET. So this is using .NET Interactive, which lets you run .NET code. And so this REPL is a read, execute, print loop, which means that you get one line, one at a time to read something in. So let's initialize something with a bigger font and ruin everything else. There we go. Let's actually do some of that. We're going to show things off. That is Power Toys going on. We'll cover that in a bit. But let's create a list. So this is our integers. And we want this to be a new int array from 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll just hit enter. So this should, if I haven't screwed this up, oops, integers equals new int 1, 2, 3, 4. This will create an integers thing, just like normal .NET. And what that lets you do is kind of run these code line by line. So now let's say we want to filter that. So I want the integers where I is greater than or equal to 3, for example. If we run this, it'll just print out the results right there. What we want to do is, instead of you having to run .NET-REPL to get this started, I want to be able to pull this dropdown and click to create this profile. All of these different profiles are available to you, and you can customize them, even customize each individual appearance so that each of them will be distinct from one another. This allows you to kind of set up all sorts of different things. Some of these will be installed by default, or you can add your own. So we're going to kind of walk through how to add your own and kind of get started there. It doesn't have to be doing .NET-REPL and running that. You can run other things. Like I have things that SSH into different clients in my home network. Things like that are options. You also have things like the Azure Cloud Shell. If you want a separate terminal that connects to your Azure Cloud Shell, that's an option as well. There are docs for how to do that in the Azure Cloud Shell docs. So I'll leave that as a sort of a separate thing, but that's an option as well. So there's different ways to kind of configure and start playing around with these things. So for this, we're going to kind of pick up and start editing things. The Windows terminal, just kind of going back to what this is a place for you to run and host all of your environments. It lets you run different shell environments inside of it. So there's two, once you have this installed, there's two different options that you have. There is the default one that you're going to have, which is the Windows console host. And then there's the other one, which is the Windows terminal. So you can use either of those. If you've seen the black command prompt, that is the Windows command host. The new one is the Windows terminal. I highly recommend giving the Windows terminal a try. If you haven't, it is super nice. And it supports more modern features than you might see in the Windows command host. So useful things that just make your terminal really nice. So that's all of that. This is the default settings page. We're just going to kind of quickly run through these things. I wouldn't feel too concerned about changing some of these things. You can redo them. So you have a default profile, so you can change what it boots into. So I use PowerShell mostly. I have enough aliases to get by with Windows stuff. If you want to default into your WSL environment, you just switch over to whichever WSL environment you use, save those changes, and then the next time you open up a Windows terminal, let's just do that. Sure. We should end up in WSL. So this is now my Ubuntu machine running in WSL. And it's just working. Yes. Hi. IOPTA or Lopta. I honestly can't tell because it's anyway. I highly recommend giving it a shot. WSL2 is great. It's super easy to get started. There's images just available for you on the Windows terminal, or well, there's two places. We were just talking about Winget. So let me open up a PowerShell because I just switched my thing. You can do Winget search, and I believe you can find the things here. So we just search for Ubuntu and Winget. Lopta. Okay, thank you so much. I apologize for getting that wrong. So you can search on Winget, and you will see the different options. So, for example, if we search for Ubuntu, there are a number of different options at different releases that you can choose to install here, or you can go onto the Windows Store and pick the one you want. And then you just start them. WSL will actually boot directly into my default version. So now I'm just in Ubuntu just by running that. You can also just exit out and run fun things like, let's run, I don't know. What's something that isn't available on Windows that is available inside of here? Hello world? I don't know. That's not a good example. But you can do things like that too, to just kind of wrap your commands to run them. Another really cool thing that I was going to kind of get to later, but we can cover right now. If you use Windows Explorer, you can also enter different things here. So for example, if I want to open up PowerShell, I can just type PowerShell here, and it's going to open up a version of PowerShell in that location on my machine. So now I'm in that directory. This opened up in Windows terminal because I have that as my application host. If you have it as the Windows command host, it will open up that separate Windows PowerShell window for you. Uname is your current username, right? I'm really bad at remembering. There we go. So that gives you back Linux. I'm really bad at remembering certain like things like this. I tend to only use the command line when I need to, but I find it super useful. So that's all of that. You can do, we ran PowerShell. You can also run cool things like, this won't work. Well, actually, it will. You can just do WSL, and that should do the same thing. It will invoke WSL, run it in my default Linux environment at that location. So now I'm in that same location in my Ubuntu VM or WSL instance right there. So it's pretty neat. This gives you all of those different ways to do that. If you need to quickly kind of open up different shells at different locations from Explorer, that's an option. While we're tells us about your operating system, we could just, yeah. I think you don't need to quote this. So WSL man uname should just work. There you go. So here's the man pages for uname in the version of Ubuntu I'm running, which I believe is 2004. So there you go. But anyway, WSL is super cool. It gives you the ability to access all sorts of things. And now you can actually run graphical applications with WSL, which is not something that I've actually played around with too much. But if you need specific Linux graphical applications, you can actually run those as well. So there you go. I am not sure about subtitles. Sorry, apologies if we that's normally a thing, but that's actually not something that I'm super familiar with. But we can take a look and try to pull something together for that. Hopefully make it more accessible. So there we go. So that is, I guess, a quick talk about WSL. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that are going on here, and let's actually kind of start crafting a profile, because what we're trying to do is run .NET and get this to run. Turns out this is actually pretty straightforward to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of work to do this, so you can just start creating these different things. So in this case, that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a custom profile to do this and see what happens. So let's go into our settings again. This lets us kind of customize all of this. I'm going to switch back to PowerShell as my default, and everything's there. Let's make this bigger again. There we go. If you are curious how I'm doing that, let's get a little bit distracted and talk about PowerShell or PowerToys. So PowerToys is a tool that adds a whole bunch of useful features to Windows. It allows you to do a whole bunch of things that are really useful that you might not have normally. Some things you might be familiar with if you're coming from different environments, for example. If you're coming from a Mac, I have this configured to Windows space, but you have PowerToys run, which gives you a command window. So if I do this, that's hard to see because it's black on black. Let me just quickly switch to something that's, there we go. Let's do that. So now we have a thing that we can type into. So this can do all kinds of things. It can run queries for you. It can also launch programs, things like that. So if I want to run code, there's VS Code. You can see it also has a list of all the running tabs, so I can switch to running tabs in my browser. It also lets you do things like math. So we can do 5 times 5 and get 25. So if you just need really quick math, or you need a way to launch programs quickly, this gives you an option. It's very similar as far as finding programs that you might find with the start menu, but this can also do things like finding open files and things like that, and switching directly to those open instances. So it's a pretty handy thing, and then it just goes away when you're not ready to use it. So there's that. There's a few other things. I'm using Windows Shift when I drag windows to move them between custom-sized locations. Why would I use that when I have a slide rule? You're more than welcome to use a slide rule. I will not stop you. I might, yeah, you know what? Go for it. You can do whatever you want. But there might be a few people who are maybe don't know slide rules. I don't even know how to read one. So yeah. Tries to read REPL as a file. What's the fix? So if .NetRepel is not installed by default. So that I should mention that. .NetRepel is an extension to .NET. So the way this works is you can actually extend .NET with different tools. One of them is a REPL, which lets you read certain lines of code, execute them, and print out the results over and over and over again. So this is that. In order to install it, you need to install a tool. So it's .NET tool install -g and then .NET REPL, and that will give it to you. This lets you add third-party tools directly to .NET that can be integrated with the pipeline. So you can actually start integrating those things. So you can do these. There's a bunch of different options. I've seen some for example, doing linting and things like that. This one gives you a REPL that you can use in C# or F#. So there's examples here on this GitHub. I can share the link in chat if people would like. So there you go. Cool. So that is that. But yeah, it will not work because I believe it'll look for a project file or a solution file to execute. When you just run it with .NET REPL, it will give you an error. You'll need to install this first in order to get that to work. But yeah, that's a fun thing with .NET. This is using .NET Interactive, which lets you run .NET code sort of as you want. It lets you create cool .NET experiences. So there's all of that. And then after that, you get a few examples of how to actually run this. And it should just support all the normal stuff you expect C# to support. So that's what we're going to be kind of jumping into. So yeah, what else was I talking about? We had fancy zones. That was the thing when you can slide windows around. So in this case, if I hold Windows Shift, it lets me move between all the different zones. It also means that I can move between different things. Is F# to Fortran what C# to is to C? I don't know. I actually have not done much with F#. I've very briefly used it. It's a functional programming language. So if you are a fan of functional programming languages, it's worth checking out. There's lots of really cool things that get done in F#. It's just not something that I've personally explored too much. If people would be interested in me learning F# in like a stream or something, let me know in chat and we can definitely set that up because that would be cool. But yeah, it's definitely it's not Fortran. It's its own thing. That's pretty fun to use. So there we go. But yeah, this gives you a way to kind of move windows about. I think that's pretty much everything we need to talk about there. There's a bunch of other things that you can do in this. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the other one that I really enjoy, I do a lot of 3D printing, and so there's File Explorer add-ons. So you can extend the preview windows in File Explorer to support things like STLs, for example, and render a Visual Studio Code thing as a preview in Explorer. which I don't know if it works here. No. So this is what you'd normally see. You'd see just black text. If I go and find a C# thing, let's go here. C#. Sorry, this is a mess. And we'll just click program. If I click program now, we're actually going to get a syntax highlighted version of our code in the preview window. So this is something that is completely, that is coming from PowerToys and letting us see our code in a little bit nicer fashion than just black and white text. So also a handy little thing that it adds. So there you go. Let's see here. What else? We were going to do our thing. I'm going to go back to shaders because we'll get to that eventually, I guess. And there we go. So I'm going to leave. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you zoom in just a little bit?
On what?
On the document you have open right now. There you go.
There we go. Is that better a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for the icons or the text is small. I don't think there's a way I can make that bigger. So apologies if that's too small. Let's see here. If we go back to our profiles, let's actually implement this. It turns out it's not too difficult to actually start doing this. You need to change one configuration for that. So on the left-hand side here, we can see all of our profiles. Can I? Oh, I cannot make this bigger. That is unfortunate. So we have our profiles here. Let's actually just open up our JSON file. This will show you the same thing. We're going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. This will give us a way to kind of see exactly the same stuff, just in a code format or a configuration format. So this is the configuration that I have for my VS Code or for my terminal that lets me actually customize everything. So the first part is actions. These are things that you can customize to run specific actions. If you want to set up custom hotkeys, this is how you do that. So for example, if you're using tmux, for example, on Linux, and you want some fancy way to switch between things that isn't the default, that could work. You can also use this to do different things. In this case, we have a split pane, which will allow us to actually split the panel in half. If we go and look at our terminal, it's Control-Shift-D, I believe. What is it? Alt-Shift-D. All right. There you go. So you can actually split your window into a whole bunch of different sections, so you can interact with that. Let's make these bigger. Apologies, every time I make a new one, it's creating it at the default size. And so I need to remember to make these bigger. But that allows you to kind of split your window, sort of like tmux. But you can actually run different entire environments like this. So one of the cool things, just talking about this because we're here, let's say I want, instead of two versions of PowerShell running here, let's not do that. Instead, let's, I didn't need to do that. Let's just exit out. Let's do that. And instead, let's do Windows Terminal. And we want to run our default environment. And then, so I believe that's -p PowerShell. So we're going to say run our PowerShell profile. And then also split the pane with -p Ubuntu. And this should run our Ubuntu stuff. Nope. What did I do wrong? Let me quickly jump back to the docs because that actually talks about this. And I don't remember it exactly off the top of my head. Split pane -p. Okay. Let's try that. So what did I do wrong? -p, we need that. And so now I've split my terminal, and I have a copy of both terminals running here. On the left-hand side, I have my PowerShell instance, and on the right-hand side, I have my WSL instance running in Ubuntu. They're both in the same directory. They're both looking at the same file system, but they're in two different environments. How does Curses support the new Windows terminal? I am not familiar with Curses. Is that what is that? I've heard, okay, so I've heard of Curses. I'm completely blanking. So if you can help me in chat, I can maybe help you out. But we'll give a few more examples, I guess. So let's create our profile. If we look at this in two different ways, skipping down here, we have our default profile, which is a GUID pointing to the specific profile that we want to use. And then we have a bunch of configurations for our profiles. Curses is a popular library for controlling output to a terminal. Okay. I'm not sure. I've never tried it, but I think what we'll show here, hopefully, is that you should try it yourself. This should be able to host most things. If you have a shell that you're trying to host somewhere, it should be able to live in the Windows terminal. And if it doesn't, then let us know, and we can take a look. So there we go. So the defaults is the default definition of everything that's going on here. I'm sorry, Desired. I don't know what MIPS is, other than the MIPS processor. Which I had to design in school. I had to design a MIPS compatible processor in school, but I haven't done anything other than that. So I'm not sure I could help you out that much, unfortunately. The language code, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know if we know much about that. But if you look at the defaults here. We have a whole bunch of things that are the defaults across all of my profiles. So these are going to be repeated over and over against all of the other profiles that I'm using. So if you want to have a custom font, for example, that's the same across all of theirs. I'm using Cascadia Mono PL, which is the Powerline supporting version. That gives you fancy symbols that work with Powerline. So if you have Oh My Posh or Oh My Z Shell or whatever you're doing, that should also work. Come back to some of this later. And then we just have a list of all of our profiles. So each of these has a GUID assigned to it. This one should match our default profile because that's our default profile we're using. And then you can give them a name and what to actually run. So there's a few different things going on here to make this work. We have the name of what this is. So if we look at our terminal and pull this down, we have Windows PowerShell. That's coming from this name. We also have a starting directory. You can provide a default starting directory to open this in. Or if you provide null, what's going to happen is when you actually go to open that, it's going to take the current working directory. If you have an explicit starting directory, that's going to override whatever it is. So that will prevent you from using the Explorer thing that I was showing, where you could open Windows Terminal with whatever it is in that location. That won't happen anymore because you'll be defaulting back to a different directory. But this is that configuration. And most of these look the same. The only difference are these ones. So for example, my WSL example has just a source. And same for my Azure Cloud Shell. Those do not have commands that they're executing. Instead, they're looking at a specific source, and that is what is called a dynamic profile. So those are documented here in the link that is or should be in chat. And so this gives you a way to dynamically pull these things out. This is how a lot of the default profiles are created for you. And so that is where this is coming from. And that is, I think, most of what I know about it. But that gives you, that's how WSL is coming about. So there we go. What else? I think that's mostly everything we have here. You can customize a lot more. You can customize the icons and things like that if you want. So what we're doing, hello. What we're doing is exploring a bunch of the different tools that you can use on Windows to develop different things in your normal day-to-day. So we're kind of exploring Windows Terminal. We just finished doing some PowerToys examples and a few other fancy things that you can do on Windows. So that's sort of what we're exploring right now. So a few other things. This is my more complicated one, which is just SSHing into different clients. And then other things you can do is have customizable color schemes. You want to change how things appear. This is where you would do that. You'll get a few by default, or you can just grab some from GitHub or somewhere else to use those. So that's that. Let's take a look and actually create a profile. So to create a profile, you could do that from this JSON file. You can just pull this JSON file and add a new entry here, or you can just click add a new profile and select one to copy from this list. So that will allow you to, for example, grab Windows PowerShell. Let's just create a copy of this and save that. What? Oops, sorry. Not save, duplicate, sorry. So Windows PowerShell, and then we click duplicate. That creates a new list in our thing, so it's at the bottom here. And that actually means that we can look at all of these different things and see what's going on. So if we want to call this, say, our .NET-REPL, so let's do .NET-REPL. And here we want a custom command line. So we are going to run .NET-REPL. And that's that. That's all you need to do in order to create a custom profile. This works for SSHing. This works for other things if you want to run certain commands and create certain environments that are going to do things. For example, if you wanted to use Python's REPL, that would work here too. So you can do those. You can customize the icons, and then we just need to click save. And now that is there. So we have this. It's still using the PowerShell icon because I did not change that. But we can just click this and open it, and now we have the .NET-REPL in C#, just running for us in this custom window. So this is a window specifically dedicated to this. And so it should go away. That's not going to work because that's going to try to run in C#. But it's just a REPL inside of this. So now we have an entire profile that is just dedicated to being able to run our console write line, hello world. Because why not? So this lets us kind of do all of those things. If you want custom profiles, if you want a way to sort of tinker with and create custom things, this is a really great way to do that. It also means that you can add other shells. If there's other shells that you prefer using, those are options as well. So you can experiment with that. I would recommend giving that a little shot and seeing what you think. And yeah, exploring. And then we should be able to see, if I search down here, we have the configuration that got added for this. So some of this we probably don't necessarily need. Because we're duplicating, some settings will get copied over. But we can actually change all of these. So this is the configuration for that .NET-REPL. You can see the name here. And then the command line is right there. So we're actually, that's not going to be helpful. We have our command line with .NET-REPL being run. We can just change this or experiment with other settings here to modify that. And so that's how that is all happening. So hopefully this is helpful. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if it's unclear what's all going on here, but hopefully this is kind of neat. You can also use this to, again, set up things like WSL. Is padding in pixels? I believe so. Let me see. A lot of these are documented. So same around all sides. But I'd have to double check. I believe it is. I don't think it's some other unit. But it's not. actually something I've checked on. It's also not something that I've actually changed. That's actually just pulled in, I believe, from somewhere else. So that's coming from some other thing. Is there an alternate unit that works well for high DPI screens? Or do we have to modify it to suit our screens? I don't know. That is a really good question, though. Let me quickly check. So I'm just going to jump over to the Windows terminal. The Windows terminal is open source, so you can actually go and jump in and try using this and see what that source code looks like and how it's working. And so let's see here. Adding DPI. I don't know if that's going to work. Customize line spacing. So this looks like it might be relevant. This is standard use for show graphics in console. I'm not sure. This would be something that I'd have to check on because it's not something that I've looked into. But potentially there's an option. There's a solution there. If you don't find one, consider filing an issue. Look at our contributing thing and just consider filing an issue, and we can somebody might take a look. Yeah, there we go. This is the first time that I've heard of that term, the sixel. Yeah, not super familiar as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of what I tend to do, my personal expertise tends to be mostly backend stuff. So making things look good and that kind of thing is not necessarily what I'm really good at. But I do like developer tools. So that's sort of one of the things that I'm getting into. Sixels were one of the first ways to display graphics on a text display. That's actually fascinating. I need to go in and read up on those more. So it sounds like they're from a serial terminal. Neat. Okay. Cool. Learning things. Awesome. That's sort of what this show is all about. If you're new, this is the first time you've been to the Reactor Code Lab. This is a weekly show that we run where we're kind of intending to learn things and hopefully share as we're learning. So that's sort of the intention. So I hope there's viewers, Johannes, because you're here. There are a number of people out on Twitch as well. So we're streaming this both to YouTube and to our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Microsoft Developer. So there's a few people there as well. So yeah. Anyway, got distracted again, but there we go. We created our profile. We can do all of that. Are there other things that I should talk about? Probably. Let's see. We took a quick look at creating a profile. So we can actually customize this and create our own profile in .NET. Oh, that doesn't look good. So that's a thing. It fixes itself, but yeah, lines are still weird. Yes. So the settings.json is actually the configuration for my Windows terminal. So this is sort of going across command lines and shells that you might run. So this is allowing me to configure what PowerShell will look like. You can have custom themes, for example, per environment. So I'm not doing that. I don't particularly like that. But if you would like, for example, let's say we want Ubuntu to use a different color scheme. So we have add our new color scheme here to our Ubuntu configuration. Let's jump down and find one that isn't what I used. These are old and have been updated. So let's just take Campbell. So they have a whole bunch of different settings here, and then a name somewhere in there. These got alphabetized, so it doesn't exactly make sense in my configuration, and I haven't fixed it. But the name is in there. The name is how you work with this. It's a key value thing. So if we jump back up to our, where is it? Here we go. If we swap this in, we should be able to change the color settings for this. That's not how that works. So let's open up an Ubuntu copy. And hopefully, yeah, these look a lot less good. So now we have black and white, which is the same thing. And then we have this really dark blue and black, which I don't know if anybody can read that because I can't. So that's the options you can kind of customize each of these different profiles. You'll see my PowerShell instance still normal. That one hasn't changed. So if you want like custom backgrounds, for example, for each different terminal, that's an option. I've seen some people who will embed an image of the specific environment that they're using in the bottom right. So for example, there will be a big Ubuntu image in the bottom right, or Docker image if you're doing that. Different ways to see what's going on there. So you can kind of take this and customize it to whatever makes sense to you. That's sort of the point. It makes it a really nice way for you to customize these things and kind of, one, make them your own and also make them useful to the way you work. So you can run all sorts of different things in it, and you can customize it to look and react how you want. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, that is the settings.json stuff. It's all here. You can just kind of open this up and play with it. If you want to get to the settings.json file and you don't know how, my recommendation is to open up the settings thing for your Windows terminal and just click open JSON file at the bottom left here. And that's going to go and open up your JSON file. And then you can just go and edit it. Most of the settings are also available in this editor window here. So you have general, appearance, and advanced to kind of customize this further. If you don't want to get into the weeds with JSON and you don't want to have to figure out how that configuration actually works, most of the stuff is available here. There are a few experimental features that aren't. So you won't necessarily find those. But other than that, most of the settings you're going to want should just be in this graphical setting. So whichever one you prefer should just work. So there we go. What else? I think that's mostly it. What else? There is a call out, I think, in the docs as well, that you can use nerd fonts or Powerline fonts or whatever you prefer. That lets you get custom symbols inside of your terminal. So if we go back to the docs, wherever I was, one of them is Cascadia Code. So this is a custom monospaced font that you can use in your terminals or code editors that lets you do all of this. If you have the Powerline version, so the PL version, that's going to give you Powerline glyphs, which is going to make your terminal look fancy. So you'll get some of those. Cascadia Code is also open source, so you can find that on GitHub as well. Is the terminal an additional download or is it in Windows 10? I'd have to double check. I believe it should come with Windows 11, but I'm not entirely sure. If you follow, I think it's aka.ms/overview Windows Terminal or Windows Terminal Overview. Let me just quickly, there you go, Overview Windows Terminal. If you follow that, it will take you to an install page. And then you can just go and click install, and it will walk you through different ways. I believe it is included with Windows 11, but I'm not sure it is with Windows 10. So I'm not sure what the supported distributions are. That would be something that I would double check on. But it's not information that I'm familiar with. So yeah, unless ISO something else, that's not a distribution. That's a separate thing. It does support UTF-8 and Unicode, but this is also not something that I am super familiar with. It does mean that you can use emojis. So if you want emojis in your code, or if you want to alias Python to a snake emoji, that's always a fun thing to do. So that's an option, and it works. So it's an 8-bit character set. I'm not familiar. You're bringing up a lot of interesting things that I'm going to have to spend after this stream kind of going into and digging into. It sounds like you know a lot more about this than I do. So that's cool. What else? You can also do background images, and it supports the acrylic rendering, which means that if you don't have a background image, it can actually render the stuff behind it, if that's something that you're interested in. And yeah, I think we've covered most of this. If people have questions, we can go on a detour. I was going to show one of the features that I really like, which is the custom shader support. So you can actually create DirectX shaders that will run over your code to do custom things, which can be a really fun way to kind of, one, step into graphics programming, and two, just make your terminal entirely your own, because shaders are interesting. So I was going to show that quickly if people are interested. Otherwise, we can go on tangents and answer questions. Happy to do that as well. So let's dive in. So you might have seen in my settings, if you were paying a lot of attention, which I don't know if anybody was, but there's this experimental pixel shader path inside of here. So what this is a path to an HLSL shader, which is a high-level shader language, DirectX pixel shader. And so that's going to allow you to run a pixel shader over your terminal. So you can render the graphics of your terminal, which means all the output text. And then you can take that and change how that's going to render. So this allows you to basically take that rendering of all the text and apply math to make it look different. I believe so. I am not super familiar with that. You'll see this is marked as an experimental feature, so I'm not sure if documentation and stuff is done. I've been using it for a while, but I've only used it on like workstations. So I'm not entirely sure. I would imagine like embedded processor or embedded graphics processors should be able to handle it, but I can't say for certain. So you're welcome to give it a shot and let me know. But yeah, so that's that. Let's jump into this. There's actually docs on this. So if you want to learn more about how to do all of this, I figured this would be a fun way to kind of do that. We're going to write something really quick because we have 10 minutes in this stream. What was the wingit command to search for and install Windows Terminal? Wingit search. So let me just jump back here. And or that'll happen. Cool. Went too fast. Cool. So let's move that over. So we can do wingit search and search for whatever you want. So Windows Terminal. You will need the quotes because it's 2 words. You can also just search for WT, which is cool. Because it's registered as a command, it will find that. So you can also do wingit search WT, and it should show up there as well. So you'll see it's returned here. You'll just get more other matches if you do that. So wingit search lets you kind of browse and search for different things. And then once you've found it, I tend to like installing things by ID. I believe you can use name, but if there's conflicts, you might run into issues. So I've just pulled in, I typically pull the ID and then use that to install it. You can also use this to manage the versions and update it and things like that. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, let's go and explore this a little bit. So there's a few different things. This is mostly just a really fun thing. Hopefully something to kind of get people tinkering. So to do this, you set up a shader path. If you don't want to do this, let me just erase everything I have because why not? So let's go into our settings here. And I don't think I can comment this out. So we're just going to do that and get rid of it for now. What we can do is we can turn on the retro terminal effects. I had to remove the shader because that doesn't work. This is just a toggle that you can do to enable retro things. So that will apply a really interesting, maybe slightly distracting, like CRT filter over this. So this is sort of an effect that you can apply if that's something you're looking for, or you just want a really cool like screen cap that looks like a terminal, has all the terminal commands is correct, but maybe has a little bit more style. This can be an option. I don't know if I'd use this personally every day, but it's definitely an option if you want something that's just kind of interesting. So there's that. I'm going to turn that back off though. But that's how that works. You just turn on the retro terminal effects and it just does it. But it's not compatible because it's just a separate thing. So it's not compatible with the Windows Terminal shaders. Those let you kind of do your own custom thing. So you can write your own program that kind of takes all the rendered bits and does whatever it wants with them. So that's what we're going to quickly throw together here. I have a whole bunch of examples. So we're just going to grab some of those. So let's create a new one. New text, sure. And let's create a new example. I already have one. Let's create a stream.hlsl. So this is just a shader file. We're going to be changing the name. That's fine. And let's open that in VS Code. And so this is going to be something that accepts inputs. So what it's going to do is take in the rendered font without the background and render that for you. And then give you that as data that you can then interpret and render for other people. So if we go and grab the sample code here, it's a little bit more than we might need, but we can actually kind of walk through what's going on here. Let's grab this example. This example is actually an inverting shader. So what it's going to do is invert the color that you see. So normally I have a dark themed terminal. So if we paste this in, we'll still have a dark theme terminal. I'm not changing the color. But what I'm doing is taking one and subtracting that from all the values of it. So we have red, green, and blue represented as XYZ in this case. Those are now going to be 1 minus whatever that is. And so with this, we'll start with, instead of black, we'll start with white and then see what we get. So to apply this, what we're going to do is go back into our settings and do experimental pixel shader path and point it at development shaders terminal and stream.hlsl. And so we point it at that shader that we want to use, and that will allow us to actually customize this and change how we want it to look. So assuming I typed all of that right, there we go. Now we have something that is inverted. That's backwards. So we do only have like 5 minutes. So if there's people that have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to walk through how this is working and what this is and how you can get started with customizing this if that's something you want to do. Then go for it. I personally really enjoy shaders. I think they're fun. And they're a really interesting way to kind of get started with using math in sort of the programming you're using. So if that's something you like, this is an option to kind of explore that without having to like set up your own rendering pipeline or anything like that. Here we go. What's going on here is we have two settings. We have our texture, which is the actual rendered text. This is the text that is rendered to your screen. So what happens is when we type a command, there is text rendered on your screen that is then rendered into the Windows terminal. We're grabbing that text and rendering that to a texture first, and then providing that to you. And then we have a sampler state, which is going to store the state of what you're trying to pull from. And then there's a number of settings that you'll get passed in, like the time. So if you want an animated thing, like my animated flag shader, that is using the time variable to actually change that over time. I'm mostly just animating something along a sine wave. You can also look at things like UI scale and resolution. I wouldn't recommend this necessarily as a way to do the like DPI dependent scaling for something. I think there's probably a better way to do that. But if you need that for whatever you're trying to do, those are provided there. And you can get the background color, whatever that is. Yes, that could be an option as well. It's possible that it could add to GPU load if that's something that you're concerned about, especially if you're trying to add an animated anything to this. That definitely could, because you're changing it. That's a lot more changes in the UI that you need to send back. So depending on what you're doing, maybe this isn't for you, but it is a fun thing and it's something kind of unique that I found. So figured we'd share it. I could edit from Linux, right? Yeah. Yes, you can. I'm a little bit, I think it depends. For the settings.json, there's nothing preventing you from editing this on any OS, but this is for the Windows terminal, so you will need to be on Windows in order for that to work. With that said, it will be fine with WSL. So if you're using WSL, like for example I am, we can just have a custom setup here, and it should just work. But I don't think the settings would necessarily carry over if you were running on a direct Ubuntu machine. I don't think that would necessarily translate very well. So that's what's going on. Let's quickly jump into this and kind of talk through what's going on. What HLSL or other graphics stuff is doing is giving you a way to run programs on your GPU, typically really lightweight things that are happening per pixel to render different things. So in this case, we have a main method, just like you'd have in any other program. But instead of accepting command line arguments or something like that, it's accepting a position in space, so a position in your terminal, and it's giving you a texture coordinate for that point. And then the output of that is the target of what you're actually rendering. So the output is going to be a four-dimensional float, which means red, green, blue, and an alpha transparency. So if you want to make transparent stuff or whatever, that's an option. And then the really important thing that's going on here is just grabbing the color from that sampled text that we have. So that's what this line is doing, is it's going into that and saying, at these specific coordinates, what color should the screen be? And then pulling that out and storing it in a color variable, and then taking the red, green, and blue values and inverting them by taking 1, because they're on a range from 0 to 1. So if you start at 1 and subtract whatever the original value is, you'll end up back basically with the opposite of whatever that was, and then just returning that. So if we want to turn this into a no-op, we can just remove the inversion, and now our terminal is back to where it was. It's just doing the exact same thing. It's just running this code to do different things. So we can do this quick. That's a web page. So I need to save this, and then let's quickly do that. And there we go. So we're back to where we were. We just have our normal terminal. It's running through all of this and doing all that normal stuff. It's just slightly different. And then if you really want to like start messing with things, let's say we only want to render the red bits of this. So we can do red dot y equals 0, color dot z equals 0. And set the green and blue values to 0. This means we're only going to get whatever's on the red bits, and restart this. And now everything is red. So this is a really quick example, but it gives you a way to kind of start customizing this and changing this. You'll note my background isn't changed because that's all rendered separately. You're just getting the text that you would render in your terminal. So it gives you a way to kind of customize that and change how that works. If there's fun ways that you want to do that, and make it a little bit more personal, or add like a flag background or something else to hopefully make it interesting. So if that's interesting to you and it's something you want to play with, there's docs out on the GitHub for that. Otherwise, I think leave it here. Hopefully some of these are things you can use. We do have a survey that we kind of use for these events to judge if people actually are interested, or if there's things we can change or do better. So if you would all fill out that survey, we would really appreciate it. It tells us if we're on track, or if my time should be spent building something else or doing something else. So really appreciate it if you would all help us out there. Other than that, thanks everybody. These are really fun when people chat. So thanks for being in chat and being awesome.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone. As Sam mentioned, please fill out the survey. The event code for this specific event is 15755. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you. Until next time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.